Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. So my dad owns a rental property in the suburbs that he's been leasing out since last summer. The tenants who moved in during October 2024 seemed like reliable people at first, and my dad felt confident about his choice. That trust evaporated just 2 months into their stay when they stopped paying rent in December. My dad, being understanding, gave them some flexibility. "Look, I know times can be tough," he told them during a phone call. "I can give you until the end of January to get caught up." January came and went without a single payment. By early February, my dad was frustrated with the whole situation. Being 2 months behind in rental income was starting to affect his own finances. He called them up with an offer. "If you move out immediately, I'll only ask for half of what you owe." They responded with their own proposition. "We'll leave the house spotless," the tenant said, "and we'll leave all our furniture behind as payment. It's worth more than what we owe you." My dad, exhausted from the ordeal, agreed just to be done with it. "Fine," he said. "Just make sure everything's in good condition when you leave." When he went to inspect the property a week later, his heart sank. Not only was the place a complete mess, but they had taken every piece of furniture, including the 2 leather sofas that belonged to my dad. He found those later, damaged beyond repair and stuffed into the backyard shed. "What happened to our agreement?" my dad texted them. "You need to pay for the furniture you took and damaged." "We'll pay you in 2 weeks, came the reply. When my dad pressed for earlier payment, they responded with, "Good luck getting your money," followed by several mocking messages. That's when my dad decided enough was enough. Through some local connections, he discovered that the tenant was Reverend Lewis, who served as a pastor at Grace Community Church, and his son Ryan was the youth minister there. My dad reached out to the church board and detailed everything: the unpaid rent, the stolen furniture, and the property damage. The next morning, my dad's phone exploded with calls from Ryan. "Who do you think you are?" Ryan shouted when my dad finally answered. "How dare you go behind our backs to the church? This is completely unfair." My dad simply ended the call, but Ryan kept calling back repeatedly. We later learned that the church board had given them an ultimatum: either make things right with my dad or find new positions elsewhere. That evening, my dad received a bank transfer for the full value of the furniture. He agreed to drop the matter, later telling me, it wasn't really about the money. As a fellow Christian, I was just disappointed to see someone in a position of spiritual leadership act with such dishonesty. The next one is an entitled People story. You know how people always say you never really know your neighbors? Well, let me tell you about Karen Lewis, the neighbor from hell who decided my cherished 2019 Ford Mustang GT belonged to her simply because she'd been secretly driving it. Let me start from the beginning. I'm a 32-year-old software developer, and I bought my dream car 2 years ago, a beautiful red Mustang GT. I worked hard for years to afford it, living frugally and saving every penny I could. When I finally drove it home, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. I live in a decent suburban neighborhood in Colorado, where most people mind their own business. Karen moved in next door about 8 months ago. At first, she seemed normal enough, a woman in her mid-40s who worked as a real estate agent. She would wave hello occasionally, and that was about it. I should have known something was off when she started making comments about my car. "That's such a beautiful car," she'd say, lingering by my driveway. "It must be nice to have such an expensive toy just sitting there most days." I didn't think much of it at the time. I work from home most days, so yes, the car sits in my driveway except when I go out for errands or weekend drives. But I never imagined what Karen would do next. About 3 months ago, I started noticing small things that seemed off about my car. The radio presets would be different. The seat position would be slightly changed. The fuel gauge would be lower than I remembered. I initially blamed it on my poor memory. Maybe I had adjusted things and forgotten about it. Then one day, I found a Starbucks receipt in the cup holder that I knew wasn't mine. I never go to Starbucks. That's when I decided to install a small dashboard camera that would activate when the car was started. A week later, I checked the footage and nearly fell out of my chair. There was Karen, bold as brass, using some kind of tool to unlock my car at 7 a.m. while I was still asleep. She just got in and drove away like she owned it. The footage showed her doing this multiple times over the week, usually when I was sleeping or in my home office with noise-canceling headphones on. I was furious. I immediately called the police and showed them the footage. They advised me to not confront her directly and said they would handle it. But before they could act, things got even crazier. The next morning, I woke up early and caught Karen in the act. She was just about to get into my car when I walked out onto my driveway. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Karen turned around, and I swear to you, she had the audacity to look annoyed at me. "I'm going to work, obviously," she said, like I was the one being unreasonable. "In my car?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Look, she said, putting her hands on her hips. "I've been driving this car every day for months now. I think we both know it's basically mine at this point. You barely use it." I stood there, mouth agape, trying to process the sheer insanity of what I was hearing. "Are you out of your mind? That's not how car ownership works. I bought this car. I have the title. I pay the insurance. Get away from my car right now." "Don't be so selfish," Karen snapped. "I need this car for my real estate business. It helps me make sales. You just use it to go grocery shopping. Besides, possession is 9/10 of the law." "That's not even remotely how the law works," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'm calling the police right now." "Go ahead," she sneered. "I have documentation proving I've been driving this car regularly. I've even been keeping maintenance records." That's when it hit me. She had actually been taking my car for oil changes and keeping the receipts, as if that somehow made her the owner. The delusion was mind-boggling. I called the police, and they arrived quickly. Karen put on quite a show for them, presenting a folder full of maintenance receipts and photos of her with the car at various locations. She even had the nerve to show them her garage door opener that she'd somehow programmed to my car. "Officers, I've been using this car for my business for months now," she explained confidently. He never objected before. He clearly gave implied consent by allowing me to use it all this time. The officers looked at me, and I showed them the dashboard camera footage on my phone. I also pulled up the car's title and insurance documents on my phone. One of the officers, Officer Rodriguez, tried to reason with Karen. "Ma'am, having maintenance receipts doesn't make you the owner of the vehicle. What you've been doing is theft. Mr. Johnson here has video evidence of you taking the car without permission, and he has all the legal documentation proving ownership." Karen's face turned red. "But I need this car. My clients expect a certain image, and my Honda Civic doesn't cut it. He's being selfish by keeping it all to himself." "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez said firmly, "you're currently looking at charges of grand theft auto. The fact that you've been doing this repeatedly makes it even more serious. Please step away from the vehicle." But Karen wasn't done. She started screaming about how unfair it was, how I was discriminating against her as a successful businesswoman, and how she would sue me for leading her to believe the car was available for her use. She even claimed she had improved the car's value by maintaining it so well. The officers finally had enough and arrested her right there on my driveway. The sight of Karen being handcuffed while yelling about her rights to my car attracted quite a crowd of neighbors. Some were filming on their phones, and I later found out the video went viral on our neighborhood Facebook group. But the drama wasn't over. After Karen was released on bail, she filed a civil suit against me, claiming she had established beneficial ownership of the car through regular use and maintenance. Her lawsuit demanded either ownership of the car or compensation for all the maintenance she had performed without my consent. I hired a lawyer, Jim Patterson, who actually laughed when he read her lawsuit. "This is one of the most ridiculous cases I've seen," he told me. "She's basically admitting to theft in her own lawsuit. This will get thrown out quickly." He was right. When we went to court, the judge was visibly irritated by Karen's arguments. Her lawyer tried to argue that there was an implied contract because I hadn't stopped her sooner, conveniently ignoring the fact that I hadn't known about the theft. To anyone reading this who might be dealing with their own Karen situation, don't wait to take action. Document everything, report it to the authorities, and don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking you're overreacting. Your property is yours, no matter what creative legal theories your entitled neighbors might concoct. And if you ever see someone suspicious around your neighbor's car, say something. I wish someone had told me sooner about Karen driving my car around. It would have saved me months of confusion and stress. But at least now I have a story that even my grandkids won't believe. About the neighbor who stole my Mustang and claimed it was hers because she drove it to work every day. Life was slowly returning to normal, but I didn't think I'd ever take my car's security for granted again. And every time I started the engine and heard that beautiful V8 rumble, I smiled knowing that it was mine and mine alone, no matter what any delusional neighbor might think. Update, 6 months later. I need to update you all on what happened after Karen moved away because things got even crazier. Remember how I mentioned she had apparently done something similar with a neighbor's boat in her previous neighborhood? Well, that neighbor found my story online and reached out to me. It turns out Karen had been sued multiple times for similar behavior in 3 different states. She had a pattern of moving into upscale neighborhoods and helping herself to her neighbors' luxury vehicles and boats. She would always claim some kind of implied ownership through use, and sometimes even tried to sell the vehicles she'd stolen. The neighbor Mike told me Karen had taken his boat out several times without permission and even listed it for sale on a boating website. He only found out when a potential buyer showed up at his house asking why the boat was listed $20,000 below market value. Karen had actually scheduled viewings of his boat while he was at work. After hearing this, I contacted the prosecutor handling Karen's probation case. They were very interested in this pattern of behavior, especially since Karen hadn't disclosed her previous legal issues during her plea deal negotiations. The prosecutor filed a motion to revoke her probation based on the fraudulent omissions in her pre-sentence investigation. Karen had been required to disclose all prior legal issues, and she had claimed under oath that this was her first offense. Last week, we had a hearing about the probation violation. I testified about my case, and Mike flew in to testify about the boat incident. Karen's ex-husband also testified, revealing that they had moved so many times because of her borrowing things from neighbors. The judge was not happy. He revoked Karen's probation and sentenced her to 18 months in state prison for violating the terms of her plea agreement. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and she's been ordered to undergo intensive psychiatric treatment. But here's the most satisfying part. The prosecutor worked with authorities in other states to create a database entry about Karen's specific type of theft. Apparently, there's a small but persistent group of people who repeatedly steal vehicles and then claim ownership through use. They're calling it possession-based theft fraud now, and Karen's case is being used as a textbook example. I also found out that Karen had been writing a blog about her life hacks for living luxuriously on a budget, where she actually gave advice about how to gradually take possession of neighbors' vehicles. The blog has been taken down, but the prosecutor added it to the evidence file for her probation violation. The insurance industry got wind of this too. My insurance company worked with several others to create new policies specifically covering unauthorized use by neighbors. They interviewed me for their internal training program, and I received a lifetime discount on my premium for helping them identify this type of fraud. As for my Mustang, something good came out of all this extra attention. A representative from Ford's marketing team contacted me after seeing the story. They're launching a new security feature in their vehicles called Neighborhood Watch Mode, which includes cameras and location tracking. They asked me to be part of their promotional campaign, and guess what? They're giving me a brand new 2025 Mustang GT in exchange for sharing my story. The judge's response was memorable. Ma'am, you can't steal someone's property and then claim ownership because they didn't catch you quickly enough. That's not how the law works. That's not how any of this works. The civil case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile it. But that wasn't the end of her problems. The criminal case for grand theft auto was still pending, and the prosecutor had a strong case with my video evidence and Karen's own admissions. Throughout this whole ordeal, Karen's life began to unravel. The viral video of her arrest had reached her real estate clients. Her broker suspended her license pending the criminal case outcome. She had to hire an expensive criminal defense lawyer, and her reputation in the neighborhood was completely destroyed. Some neighbors told me they had seen her driving my car around, but assumed she was either borrowing it or car-sitting for me. A few even apologized for not saying anything sooner. The whole situation made everyone realize how important it is to speak up when something seems off. The criminal case concluded last week. Karen took a plea deal to avoid jail time, but she got 3 years of probation, had to pay me restitution for unauthorized use of my vehicle, including wear and tear, and had to undergo psychological evaluation and counseling. She also had to write me a formal apology letter, which was about as sincere as you'd expect. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Johnson, I apologize for any misunderstanding regarding the use of your vehicle. While I still believe my actions were justified by necessity, I acknowledge that the law does not support my position. I will not attempt to use your vehicle again." Not exactly a heartfelt apology, but at least it was something. The judge wasn't impressed either and reminded her that any violation of the no-contact order would result in jail time. The aftermath of this whole situation has been interesting. I've installed security cameras around my house and a kill switch in my car. My insurance company had a field day with this case and actually used it, with my permission, as an example in their training materials of why customers should report suspicious activity immediately. Karen's husband, who had been traveling for work during most of this drama, finally returned and was horrified by what had happened. He filed for divorce shortly after, unable to deal with the embarrassment and her refusal to acknowledge she had done anything wrong. They put their house up for sale last month, and I heard they're moving to another state. The neighborhood has changed too. People are more vigilant now, and we've started a proper neighborhood watch program. Some good actually came from this crazy situation. We're all closer as a community, looking out for each other more than before. As for my Mustang, it's safely parked in my garage now, with multiple layers of security protecting it. I had it thoroughly detailed to remove all traces of Karen's unauthorized joyrides, and I've added some upgrades I'd been putting off, including a better security system. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Second, document everything. That dashboard camera saved me from what could have been a much more complicated legal battle. And third, never underestimate the entitlement of some people who think the world owes them whatever they want. I still can't believe someone would actually think they could steal a car and claim ownership just because they drove it regularly. The sheer audacity of it all still amazes me. But at least justice was served, and I got a story that nobody believes until I show them the viral video and court documents. The best part? I just found out that Karen's story has become a cautionary tale at the local real estate agency's training sessions about professional ethics and respecting property rights. Sometimes the best revenge is knowing that your crazy neighbor's actions will be used to teach others what not to do for years to come. Last week, I ran into Karen's ex-husband at the local grocery store. He apologized again for everything and revealed that Karen had apparently done similar things in their previous neighborhood with a neighbor's boat, though they had moved before it escalated to this level. If only her previous neighbors had pressed charges, maybe she would have learned her lesson sooner. As I finish writing this, I can look out my window and see my Mustang gleaming in the sunlight, safely parked in my driveway. The for sale sign on Karen's house has a sold sticker across it, and moving trucks are scheduled for next week. Good riddance. I'm keeping my current Mustang too. It's got sentimental value now, and I've added so many security features that it's probably the most theft-proof Mustang in the country. The new one will be my daily driver, while the Karen-proof one is becoming my weekend car. The neighborhood has changed for the better. We've set up an active community watch program, complete with security cameras that cover all the driveways. Several neighbors have installed similar dashboard cameras in their cars, and we've even created a group text alert system for suspicious activity. Karen's ex-husband stopped by one last time before moving away. He shared that Karen had been diagnosed with a peculiar form of delusional disorder that made her truly believe she was entitled to use other people's property. He apologized again and gave me a check to cover any remaining depreciation on my car, even though he wasn't legally obligated to do so. The whole experience has made me a stronger person. I used to avoid confrontation and doubt myself when things seemed off, but not anymore. I've learned to trust my instincts and stand up for myself immediately when something's not right. I've been invited to speak at several community safety workshops about my experience, and I'm working with a local consumer protection lawyer to write a guide about vehicle security and ownership rights. We're calling it Your Car, Your Rights, a guide to protecting your vehicle from modern theft schemes. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for the whole crazy experience. Almost. It taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, the importance of documentation, and how to navigate the legal system. Plus, I ended up with 2 Mustangs, a better security system, lower insurance rates, and a stronger community. For those wondering, Karen's house sold to a lovely retired couple who actually asked permission to take a photo with my Mustang for their Christmas card. I said yes, of course, and we all had a good laugh about it. Sometimes the best way to move past a bad situation is to find humor in it. The security cameras are staying up, though. You never know when another Karen might move in. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I work at a casino as a dealer. We have a first-in, first-out way of scheduling dealers, so if you start at 7 p.m., you get to leave before people that started at 8 p.m. when they are able to close tables down and send you home. Pretty normal and straightforward. If more than one person starts at the same time, then who gets the option to leave first is assigned on a rotating basis. So if you have the first option one week, you will be second the following, the third after that, then back to one. So one afternoon, I was reporting to work with 2 other dealers, all set to start at the same time. I was looking forward to a short evening, as I was the first option and I had plans after work. I arrived 10 minutes before my shift, and noticed one of the dealers who was starting at my start time was already dealing. They, the dealer, must have been in the EDR, and the pencil needed a dealer to start right away. I confirmed that they had started 15 minutes before their scheduled time, and they were the third option. Fast forward 6 hours, and we had tables we could start closing. I'm stoked to get out of there when I look over and see the dealer that started early leaving before me. I pointed out that I was supposed to be leaving before her, and she gave me a shit-eating grin and said, "Well, I started before you, so I have the first option." And then she just walked off all smug. I was super pissed and said something to the supervisor. He shrugged me off and said, "It's policy. First to start leaves first." Okay, game on. I knew this coworker had kids and had to wait for her mom to come over to babysit before she could leave for work. so she wasn't always early for her shift. I have no kids or obligations, so I started showing up 2 hours before my shift and just chilling in the EDR. I would let the supervisor know I was there in case they needed me to start early, which they always did because they would not refuse to open a table for lack of staff knowing I was on property and available to work. 3 weeks of this, and I had held the first option on every shift I worked. The dealer who was all smug about starting early was getting frustrated and angry at me. Having to stay super late every night was wearing her down. "It would be nice to get off before close just once," she said to me once as I was leaving early yet again. I told her I was just following policy, and she was welcome to show up early to make sure she was always first out. 2 more weeks and many complaints to the boss later, the policy was changed. Now, in order to jump option numbers, you have to be called in over an hour before your scheduled time. 15 minutes wasn't going to cut it anymore if you wanted to leave early. I hope that it was worth it for her staying until near close for over a month over that 15 minutes. I am petty, and I have a lot of free time. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.